In 1912, workers digging beneath the Vanderbilt family's Fifth Avenue mansion made a discovery that would never appear in any newspaper. No headline announced what they found, no photograph captured the moment, and for over a century, what lay beneath one of America's most famous addresses remained buried under layers of silence, money, and careful misdirection. The date was March 17, 1912. A Sunday. The construction crew wasn't supposed to be working, but deadlines were tight, and the Vanderbilt estate manager had authorized overtime at double the normal rate. 7 men descended into the foundation excavation, armed with pickaxes, shovels, and kerosene lanterns. Their task appeared straightforward: shore up the northeastern corner where engineers had detected settling that threatened the mansion's structural integrity. What they found instead would haunt 3 of those 7 men for the rest of their lives. The other 4 took their silence to the grave, either by choice or by pressure we can only speculate about today. But the 3 who talked, even in hushed conversations with family decades later, painted a picture of something that shouldn't have existed beneath a private residence, something that revealed the true nature of how concentrated wealth operated in America's Gilded Age. The Vanderbilt name represented American success in its purest form. Cornelius Vanderbilt had turned steamships and railroads into a fortune that dominated an entire era. By 1912, his descendants controlled wealth conservatively estimated at over $200 million. In today's purchasing power, that fortune would equal somewhere between $305 and $500 billion, a level of wealth concentration that made them effectively sovereign within the American economic system. But that wealth came with secrets about how it was really accumulated, what happened to competitors, and infrastructure built not for public benefit, but for private control. Some of those secrets were quite literally underground, built into the foundation of America's most ostentatious display of Gilded Age excess at 640 Fifth Avenue. The official story was simple. The mansion needed repairs, standard maintenance for a structure that size. Workers went down with shovels and came back up with dirt. But 3 construction workers told a vastly different story. They spoke of tunnels, of finished rooms that shouldn't exist beneath a private home, and of infrastructure built for purposes that made no architectural sense. They spoke of discovery, of orders to stay silent, and of payments that seemed designed to buy discretion rather than compensate labor. They spoke of being genuinely frightened, not of physical danger or collapse, but of what the discovery meant, who had built it, and why. Understanding what was found requires understanding how the Vanderbilts actually operated. The popular narrative paints them as railroad barons who built American infrastructure and created jobs, but that narrative carefully omits certain details. Cornelius Vanderbilt didn't invent railroads or steamships. What he perfected was the art of monopoly through strategic destruction. His approach was elegant in its brutality. Identify a market, enter it not to compete, but to dominate, buy up competing operations, and systematically destroy the competitors you didn't buy. When Vanderbilt gained control of the New York Central Railroad, every competing line faced mysterious catastrophes, equipment failures at precisely the worst moments, sudden labor shortages, and inexplicable accidents that shut down operations for weeks. Bridges collapsed on competing routes, telegraph lines went dead, and freight mysteriously arrived damaged or didn't arrive at all, devastating businesses that depended on rival lines. The system continued under his son, William Henry Vanderbilt, who proved even more ruthless. William Henry pioneered what we now recognize as financial engineering. He created holding companies that owned other holding companies in nested structures that made actual ownership nearly impossible to trace. He manipulated stock prices through carefully timed information releases to financial journalists and pioneered stock watering, where assets would be valued at 5 times their actual worth and stock was issued based on those inflated valuations. William Henry famously told a reporter in 1882, "The public be damned. I'm working for my stockholders." Between 1877 and 1885, William Henry doubled the family fortune from $100 million to $200 million. That fortune needed somewhere to go, and some went into the mansion at 645th Avenue. Construction began in 1879 and finished in 1882. The public cost was reported as $3 million, an astronomical sum at the time, but that was merely the official number. The mansion featured 137 rooms spread across 4 floors, occupying an entire Manhattan block. But the real investment wasn't in what visitors could see. The foundation went far deeper than necessary, excavating 40 feet down in some places when 20 would have been sufficient. The original workers who built these features were sworn to strict secrecy through employment contracts that threatened ruinous legal consequences. Many were immigrants who understood that speaking out would mean losing their jobs, blacklisting, or deportation. The secret held remarkably well for 3 full decades until those routine foundation repairs in 1912. Thomas Brennan, the crew foreman, was the first to break through. His pickaxe went through what should have been solid rock fill and instead met empty air. The workers gathered around the opening and shone their kerosene lanterns into the darkness. What they saw was a finished, brick-lined passage with professional masonry work carefully laid in a running bond pattern. They widened the breach so they could enter. The tunnel was approximately 8 feet high and 6 feet wide, large enough for a grown man to walk through upright and for wheeled carts to pass. The walls were professionally finished brickwork, the ceiling was arched in a classic barrel vault style, and the floor showed significant wear patterns with deep grooves running along the center, created by heavy wheeled vehicles being rolled repeatedly over many years. Most surprising of all were the electric lighting fixtures mounted along the walls at regular intervals, connected to copper wiring. One of the workers tested a switch and the bulbs illuminated, still drawing power. The tunnel ran east from the mansion toward the interior of the block. They followed it for approximately 30 yards before reaching heavy iron doors set into brick frames. Inside each chamber was a room roughly 10 by 12 feet, empty now but showing clear evidence of past use. Mounting brackets were bolted to the walls for shelving. The ventilation was sophisticated with intake and exhaust shafts, and the locks were on the outside of the doors, suggesting whatever these rooms stored was meant to be secured from unauthorized access. When they reported what they'd found, the site supervisor's reaction was immediate. He told them to stop work and wait. Within 2 hours, men in expensive suits arrived, with the bearing of lawyers or executives. The conversations followed a pattern: questions about exactly what they'd seen, followed by an offer of a significant bonus payment, several months' wages, in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. Most workers signed immediately. 3 hesitated and were called back for a second conversation where the tone changed, hinting at difficulty finding future work or accidents that could happen on construction sites. All 7 eventually signed. Within a week, a specialized crew arrived, working quickly and with absolute discretion to fill the tunnel entrance with concrete, making it as if the passage had never existed. What was that infrastructure for? The answer lies in the financial panic of 1907. That panic revealed vulnerabilities the extremely wealthy found absolutely intolerable. When the Knickerbocker Trust Company collapsed, it triggered immediate runs on other banks. Depositors rushed to withdraw their money, and banks didn't have enough physical currency to meet the demands. Fortunes that existed as bank deposits and paper assets evaporated overnight. The wealthy learned that paper wealth could become worthless, traditional institutions were vulnerable, and public anger during economic distress could manifest as violence against visible symbols of wealth. The solution was to create parallel systems where wealth could be held and moved outside traditional banking channels, and gold became the primary mechanism. Gold held value independent of government decisions, but transportation and storage were massive issues. $1 million in gold at 1907 prices weighed approximately 1,500 pounds. $10 million weighed over 7 tons. Moving that kind of weight through New York streets during a panic without attracting dangerous attention was impossible. Every surface route created vulnerability. The Vanderbilt tunnel system, discovered in 1912, was part of a larger, coordinated network designed to move and store physical wealth securely between properties. Similar excessive foundations, hidden ventilation systems, and unauthorized subterranean chambers were quietly discovered over the years beneath other Gilded Age estates, including the Astor Mansion, the Carnegie residence, and the Morgan townhouse. The discovery in 1912 was particularly sensitive because that year saw the beginning of the Pujo Committee hearings, congressional investigations into the concentration of financial power. The last thing these barons needed was physical evidence of secret infrastructure built to circumvent normal financial systems. The response was a swift cover-up. Building permits that might have revealed original construction details disappeared from city archives, and the tunnel was erased. Although the Vanderbilt mansion was demolished in 1927 to make way for commercial development, and the concrete-filled foundations were largely built over, the legend endured in labor circles. Today, the modern financial system moves wealth electronically through servers rather than physical gold through brick tunnels, but the fundamental principle remains. At a certain scale, wealth creates its own hidden infrastructure, writes its own rules, and operates quietly in the shadows.